these exceptional stories, like Joe Rogan's wife is a waitress, like Matt Damon married a waitress, and they have these 5 beautiful kids and like living happily ever after. These are the types of stories that are exceptions and not the rule, but they do still exist. We can't forget that. People that find themselves in those types of situations, there's a real trust and surrender in that. And then there's a real open-hearted admiration, especially from the woman towards the man. I think that's huge. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ancient Intelligence. You've got your host, Anya Shack here, and today I want to talk about marriage. I want to gather some things that I've learned this week. I want to talk about the gold pill. I want to talk about female entitlement. I want to talk about respecting men and how all of that kind of flows together. And so upon having surpassed 100 episodes, which is really fun and really awesome, I feel very clear about the purpose of Ancient Intelligence and what my mission really is here. And it's as simple as helping average men and women want to get together, want to stay together, want to find fulfillment in that relationship and in that marriage, right? Want to get married. I think that's very important here. And for both men and women to be a absolute yes in that relationship and to feel fulfilled, satisfied, loved, understood. A big feat, I know. And we do have a lot of problems, but I feel that there are many couples I personally know that are experiencing this. There are a lot of paradigm shifts that are happening right now, and I have really high hopes in that even though it feels really dark and noisy right now, I think the men and women moving the needle right now, it's gonna compile and compile and compile, and I think things are going to move into a great direction. And let's talk about all the factors that are required to talk about for us to get there, right? Why are we not all experiencing this in this blissful way, right? There's a lot of distrust. There's a lot of misunderstandings. There's a lot of confusion, blame game, right? Resentment. And so we know that there's some issues happening. One of the things that I know is a big one is marriage, divorce rates. So that's a huge one. And I just want to do a little bit of an introduction here around what I've learned this week and what I'm thinking. So number one, I love Father Josiah Trenham's three-prong reason to get married, right? I love that he has this on his social media, and I just want to go over it real quick. So marriage is a package deal. It's God's purpose for men and women. And the package deal is the following three things. So number one, you want to procreate. You want to have children. Number two, it's a solution to our passions. And number three, it's a opportunity for sacred partnership in this life's journey. If you don't want if one of those things is not something that you want, then marriage doesn't seem like the viable option. And so that's where I'm at with that, thinking about the difference between the religious take versus the civil take. I know couples that have gotten married and aren't planning on having children, and they're not religious, and they're not focused on marriage as a spiritual endeavor, and therefore they're just effectively trying to get tax breaks, right? So that's a whole different conversation. I think for the purposes of this little introduction, I want to focus on this three-prong approach and that being the purpose for marriage. And so I've watched a lot of red pill content this week, and I've thought that the explanation of the gold pill is really interesting. Okay, and I'm going to define what that means here and talk a little bit about that and what I see and some other things I'm going to sprinkle in. And then I'm going to keep having this conversation. So effectively, this is my big takeaway from some of the things that I hear from the red pill perspectives. And that is that, as a man, I got married, I did the right thing, I provided for my family, things started not working out, marriage went sour, I did everything I could. I did the date nights. I did the therapy. I did. And she left me anyway. And then I was stuck picking up the pieces because she took most of my money. And now I can barely see my kids. The courts and the legal systems are against me. And this is bullshit. I got screwed. And what is the solution to that problem, right? So then there's the resentment and the frustration, and then just the notion that that could happen anytime. So why would I trust a woman? And that's something that I understand, and I have so much compassion for that. I understand that perspective. And so what I've been hearing recently is this idea of the gold pill. That's something that's been in the ethers of the internet lately. This is this collective of men that are talking about, okay, marriage is still important, still want to build a legacy, still want to have a family, still want all of these things. So the whole men going our own way thing is not actually quite viable. So let's come up with something new. And this notion of the gold pill, which is, as far as I've learned, based on watching some of this content and reading about it, there is this idea that the gold pill is this twofold motive for making marriage viable. And this is coming from this collective of people, Peter Wright, Paul Elam that I've listened to, and then also Shah from This Is Shah. I really admire his passion and his clarity and his knowledge about the court system. I think there's something really important to glean from that, and I think it's something that we've got to confront. As women, as men, we've got to come to the table and have this conversation. And so this twofold motive, effectively, this twofold approach for making marriage viable again, right? One, men expecting women to come to the relationship with a material or financial commitment. Two, rejection of the romantic model, right? And so these two things are what's been discussed. And then the big part of this conversation is this idea of the dowry and how we have lost our minds as modern humans because we've thrown this out, this concept of the dowry completely out. And now, no wonder over half of marriages end in divorce. There's this really unbalanced approach when it comes to who a man is and what he's got, and who a woman is and what she's got, and how they come together to make a marriage work. So I think this is really interesting, this idea of a dowry, and how in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, the Middle Ages, and in Britain and in France, especially, it seems like the French have always, based on some of the initial research I've done, there's so much literature in this, so I'm going to keep on digging in, but the French have always been quite rational when it comes to this. You might say that's why some of the French still practice the 5 to 7 thing in marriage, which that's a whole other story. But the idea is young women came to the marriage table, right? The marriage proposal, the marriage negotiation with a significant financial contribution. And that came obviously from the family. The father was responsible for making sure that his daughter had a significant dowry in order to set the family up for success. And I think that's really interesting. I even think I was reading a little bit about how even lower class people, they felt that it was so important for the viability of a marriage that lower class people wouldn't eat, or they would forego very basic living expenses so that they could at least get their daughters something, right? And I think that's really interesting. And there's a whole history of the dowry leading all the way up through the 1800s when this notion of romanticism began to take off. And you'll notice that romanticism and feminism is happening right in parallel in the 1800s. This idea of a woman needing to be rescued, the idea of like the white knight coming in and, saving the woman, and she is then cared for by him for the rest of her life, and that's it. And there's no real conversation about like what, I guess, financially she brings to the table. And so you would call these things, like, we started to get into the the notion of a love match. Oh, I'm in love, she is beautiful, and so we're gonna get married, and that's it. And so what some of these guys that are talking about the gold pill are saying is like, hey, that didn't work, that doesn't work, that's clearly not a good idea. And I think that's really interesting. I think there's a really I mean, 200 years have happened, right, since all of that. And I think there's a really important conversation to be had here about the dowry. I agree. I think there's something really incredible about this idea of responsibility. So flash forward. So again, this conversation is huge, and this is a drop in the ocean of what this conversation entails. And so now I want to talk about this idea of why feminism created this entitlement on behalf of women, which actually doesn't serve women at all. And it goes, I think, back from the 1800s all the way to today in different ways. So this notion of like, I'm a woman, I should be able to have the exact same job as you do, sir. I should be able to make the same exact money as you do. I should be able to have the same exact things. And then when asked, what do you bring to the table? The answer is then like, oh, well, just my beauty and my looks and my charm. And I think that's really interesting because there's actually, I was reading in some of the literature, there's a woman talking about how because now we have the love match, this was like in 1880, she's writing this. She was like, because we have the love match, there's this, let me find it actually, where if I can find it. Anyway, this episode is more of an intro. I'm not going to go into the specifics today, but I do want to have another episode where I screen share and share some of this stuff. And I also really want to have Shaw on here to talk about this because he's quite the well researched researcher and he's very well versed in all of this. So I think that would be really fascinating. But she was writing something about how, like, is love enough to marry on? And she basically, oh, yeah, here it is, Helen Rose. And so this idea of because now that we have a love match and now that women are being hired for their trade and they're working, right? Women are working. They're spending their money on, she calls it foolish entertaining, luxuries they can't afford, things that, aren't that important because the dowry is losing popularity and there's this idea that there will be this like romantic white knight that comes and takes you away and therefore all the years that you've spent working and making your wages you can spend it on whatever, right? Parties, fancy things, dresses, whatever. And I think that's really fascinating, right? Because if you hear it, right, if you hear the logic fallacy there, it's like, hey, I want to be able to make as much money as you men, but I don't want to have to bring anything to the table at all. So I don't think there's anything wrong with this idea of a woman, flash forward to the modern day, saying, hey, yeah, I've worked in corporate for however many years before I met my person. Here's how much money I've saved. I've been really responsible. I have, I don't know, $100,000 in the bank after working for 4, 5, 6, 8 years or whatever. Here you go. Like, I want to put this forth for our future family together. I think that's a really noble, lovely sentiment for a woman to have. And I think that is in direct contrast to the entitlement conversation, right? So one thing that a good coach of mine always said that something is based in trauma or it's not true. Something is just not true if it goes both ways, right? For those of us that have suffered with the I'm not enough conversations, like I'm not good enough, there's always this, oh, I'm too much for that person. That's why they don't like me, or I'm not enough for that person. So anytime I'm coaching someone, when I hear that fallacy where sometimes they'll say I'm too much, sometimes they'll say I'm not enough, that that's not true, right? That's coming from a traumatic place. And same can be said of feminism. Oh, I am just like a man. I can do everything that a man can do, but what do I bring to the table? Oh, my looks and my beauty, right? It's like the opposite, two opposite things are trying to be true at once. That's when you know it comes from a untrue place. There's no real truth in it. There's only resentment and entitlement in that. And pain, right? There's pain behind that. There's some sort of pain there. And I've talked about many times where all of that comes from around women and the pains that they experience when their fathers are not around, or they have distance with their fathers, or they have pain that they experience at the hands of a man. It becomes this resentment. And same can be said on the other side, right? The resentment around women from men. And I think one of the other big things that is missing in this whole conversation, and again, I'm so compassionate about this gold pill conversation. I'm compassionate about the men getting screwed in divorces conversation. Absolutely, I think that's so true. I think when I listen to some of these things, I do get the feeling that there is a real disdain and dislike for women in general, which comes from a hurt place, right? It comes from a hurt place because the truth of the matter is we talk about the moment of divorce and then what happens after. We haven't actually had the conversation about how these women, the women in question, right? The ones that have walked out on marriages for the last 20, 30 years, they have been coming of age in this man-hating media filled mainstream space, right? So they have this innate disdain for women, for men. And I'm sure that that is true in so many cases, right? Like there's actually this real disrespect and disdain that the woman in question had for men in general before even going into that marriage. And then lo and behold, 5 years later, 10 years later, she left the marriage. So I think there's also a watch out that I have for men to kind of lump women into this category in the same way that women lump men into a, category, right? Men ain't shit, whatever that stuff is. Like I don't stand for that because had these women been generous, open-hearted women that don't subscribe to feminism, don't subscribe to the entitlement, uh, are just really coming at this from a human place. And just like Father Josiah had said, are looking for sacred companionship in this life's journey. And if you want sacred companionship in this life's journey, then the opposite sex spouse, their humanity comes first, right? Their humanity comes first. And if you're clouded by any sort of anti-male or anti-female narrative, then it's not going to work, right? It's not going to work out at all. And I think there's two things. So I think that is happening on the red pill side, and that's not that nice to feel that kind of disdain, right? And disregard and kind of dislike for women. But then on the other side, there is this sense of entitlement that exists with a lot of women and is not doing them any good at all. It speaks to why there's such an obsession with the beauty industry, the physical beauty industry, makeup, plastic surgery, all of this stuff. Isn't it so interesting how women have been fighting for the same exact things as men, the access to the same things as men? The women make more money in mid to junior level roles than men, yet there's such an obsession with the physical, and it gets so over the top. And I think that there is this real confusion and misunderstanding about what the opposite sex wants in general. And I think the romanticism has stepped into this as well. I think there's an important conversation to be had about the like father protector role that a man plays even as a husband. I think that's something that the red pill folks are trying to do away with. It's like, no, we're just two exactly equal humans who have this financial contribution as we go into marriage, and let's negotiate things as if we're exactly the same. And I think that that's just not true, right? I was just watching like a clip of the wedding scene in The Sound of Music, and I just like started crying. I think there's this preciousness that does exist within women, and I think when women are not tainted by the anti-male narratives, the entitlement, and there is this kind of awe and admiration towards the men in their lives, I think that creates a really holy loop of protection and admiration, protection from the man, admiration from the woman. And that is not, there's nothing equal in that, right? It's just not that way. And I think there's also an opportunity to, so for example, the all the stories we see that are very romantic in nature. The Hollywood celebrity meets a waitress and falls in love with her and marries a waitress, right? These exceptional stories, like Joe Rogan's wife is a waitress, like Matt Damon married a waitress, and they have these five beautiful kids and like living happily ever after. These are the types of stories that are exceptions and not the rule, but they do still exist. And I think we can't forget that. I think that there is also this opportunity to talk about people that find themselves in those types of situations. There's a real like trust and surrender in that. And then there's a real open-hearted admiration, especially from the woman towards the man. I think that's huge. And there's no need to talk about a dowry or her financial contribution in that arrangement, right? But again, the media has made it seem like that's just how it's always going to happen, and that's how women need to like hold out for that. And that's just not true at all, because then you hear the other stories about women that have really encouraged and inspired men through their contribution. So I know a woman who was making, over six figures when she was in her mid 20s or late 20s working in corporate. She met her fiance. They got together. He was making actually a little less money than her with what he was doing. She really wanted to start a family. He did too. He also had a really strong business idea that he was really passionate about. And as a really feminine woman, what she did was say, "Hey, I believe in you, baby. I trust you. I think this is a great idea. Like, you can do this, and I'm going to support you every step of the way. For the next 2 years, I'm going to continue working at my corporate job, and like, I'll cover our expenses so that you can focus on your business, right?" And then for him to have a woman believe in him like that is extremely inspiring. And I think so many men want that and love that. I've heard, I had a conversation with a gentleman yesterday. He was like, "God, I just want support. I just want my woman to believe in me, you know?" And lo and behold, she made the financial contribution, right? She put forth that financial contribution, and then he excelled in his business, and then he made two times what she was making, and then four times, and then she quit, and then they started their family. And it was all because of her trust and her surrender and her belief in him. Goes back to the Midrashic story that this rabbi's wife told me about Raquel, and how she was the daughter of this really wealthy man in the town that they were living in. This is biblical times. This isn't one of the like secondary Jewish books that exists. And basically, this really poor, illiterate shepherd man came to work for her father, and she saw something in him. She saw something really special in him that was just something that just moved her as a woman. And she said that she would marry him so long as he went to go study the Torah. And she just believed, she had this feeling that he would become one of the greatest rabbis to have ever lived. And she believed in him and invested herself in him to the point where her father disowned her. And he was gone for 20 years studying Torah. And then 30 years later, he comes back with this like procession of students, because he did become this like great rabbi that she always knew he could be. And she invested in him. She cut all of her hair off so that she could sell her hair so that they could eat. There's something to be said about a female contribution. And that's what I agree with this gold pill stuff. And I'm so excited to have these conversations because I agree. And there's still the larger conversation of distrust and misunderstanding and the anti-opposite sex conversation that exists. Because when there truly is no disdain and no resentment, there is this desire for women to like be admiring their man, to be supporting him. And then for men, it's like, yeah, to be the protector and to be the provider and to take care of his family, whatever that means. And there's nothing equal about men and women in that. So finally, this notion that like feminism made way for female entitlement, 100%. Female entitlement, in my opinion, does the opposite of what women think it's doing, right? They think it's like, oh, it pedestalizes them. It makes them this like beautiful kind of like creature that's in need, that like, the white knight is going to come to save her. And really, what that does effectively is it communicates to everyone that she is nothing but her looks and her charm and her body. And isn't that the opposite of what feminism wanted? Isn't that the opposite of what like feminists want, right? Like what is a woman beyond her physical appearance? And there's so much there. So if you think back to the dowry and a woman making a financial contribution, her man coming together with her and them creating a union based on that, and then like looking the long game, looking to set up their family, and she was his counterpart, right? His companion, his counterpart, his partner in crime. And honestly, love the notion of sacred companion in this life's journey. There's so much to that. What if she's an incredible mathematician? What if she's an incredible scholar? What if she's an incredible painter? How could she not live those things out? That's a human thing, you know? I feel that women are, when they're entitled, they deny themselves of their expression and who they really, really are. And so, yeah, I think there's a conversation to be had about what is this financial contribution? How do we rethink marriage? Thinking about the dowry, this idea of female financial investment. I think it makes sense. Again, I just don't think these things are black and white. And that's what I want to talk a little bit more about. A lot of the men that I've spoken to that have been divorced, their exes were really caught up in the anti-male narrative, right? And it's really actually so interesting. And then they'll treat like men like the bigger child, right? It's like this really silly kind of Phil-Dunfication of the man on that feminist side of things, where it's like married women are almost not married because they have to take care of their husbands. I think that's so silly. But then on the other side, you have the like trad, overdone, like women are completely incapable and they need to be saved. And, they're just these like children, like childlike people. That doesn't make sense either. The truth is somewhere in the middle, like everything else in life. So really looking forward to talking more about this. But yeah, I'm really going to be focused on this whole notion of like, yeah, the purpose of ancient intelligence is to confront these modern issues that we have with ancient knowledge, ancient remedies, and maybe the dowry is one. How can we think about the dowry? I think I think it's such a beautiful thing. Um, for a woman to be like, hey, my man, I support you and I love you, and I'm so excited for you to thrive in your business. Like, yes, I've saved $200,000. Let's use that as you grow your business in the beginning. Like, I totally believe in you. Like, that's a beautiful notion, right? But then if, maybe she's someone who is one of seven children and has been caring for people and the elderly, and she hasn't been able to save all of that money, not because she spent it on nonsense and she's irresponsible, just because she hasn't been able to, right? She's got a generous, kind, loving heart. I think there's a conversation there, right? Should she not get married because she doesn't have that money? It doesn't, that part doesn't make sense to me. It's like we need to have nuanced debates about all of this stuff. But I think it is valid to say, hey, you've been working and making over $100,000 from, 25 to 33. Like, what did you spend your money on? Like, we need to have these types of conversations. So I hope that's been a nice intro, talking more about marriage. Again, excited to have Shah on and just keep going with this conversation. Let me know what y'all think below. Until the next one, y'all. Hello, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'm so happy to be here bringing my wisdom, my truths, all the research I do into pop culture and evolutionary psych and beyond to bring men and women the information that we all need to know to find that ultimate harmony with each other. This is the mission. This is why I'm here. This is what I believe in. So if you found value in what I'm doing here, please help me grow the podcast. And you can do one of two things. Either share the episode with a friend or leave me a review on Spotify or Apple. This will help me so much. Until next time.